A quick look now at international news. Rescuers are moving in to help people trapped by the recent floods in Mozambique. The death toll has risen to 38, and rescue organizations fear for the safety of hundreds of thousands more. Cyclone Kenneth hit Pemba in the north over the weekend. The country's still reeling from the aftermath of Cyclone Ida 6 weeks ago. That killed at least 1,000 people across Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe. The Spanish Socialist Workers' Party of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has won Sunday's parliamentary election, but it's short of an overall majority. It'll need help from other parties to form a government. It was the country's third election in 4 years, and for the first time in decades, an extreme right-wing party has won seats. Sri Lanka has banned people from covering their faces. It follows the Easter Sunday suicide attacks that killed more than 250 people at 8 different locations. The militant group ISIL has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Police have made several arrests. The country remains on high alert. And meanwhile, candlelit vigils have been held across the country. The persecution of Christians, a chilling reality that really makes headlines. The horrific Easter bombings of churches in Sri Lanka have raised concerns that Christians around the world are facing increased attacks. Is Christianity one of the most persecuted religions in the world? Joining me via Skype from Accra is David Otter, counter-terrorism specialist. Good to have you with us, David Otter. Is this a fact? Is Christianity increasingly coming under attack? And if so, why?
Well, of course, we're seeing a lot of recent attacks, by Islamist, type of organizations attacking Christians. Of course, we're talking about the case of Burkina Faso. We saw a recent attack in Sri Lanka. It's happened in France. But I think, as you would know better, more wars have been waged and more people have been killed. More evil has been perpetrated, in the name of religion than any other institutional force in human history. So, of course, we're seeing now that there is some kind of a rise in attacks against Christians because of the past decade or two of the rise of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda. But I don't think it's different from what we used to see in the days of the Inquisition, when Christians also used to perpetrate attacks against any other religion.
So during my time at Al Jazeera, there were so many occasions that we had to go over to Egypt, where Coptics were increasingly coming under attack then. That was also linked to ISIL and many of the other factions there involved in the country. So do they feel that they're being themselves unfairly targeted? And how can that be overcome? What should governments do? Because many of them are minorities in those countries.
I think, first of all, the Christian religion or any other religion besides the Islamic religion believes that there's been some kind of a reform in the old traditional conservative religious practices that you see in the Salafist Wahhabism. So I think, first of all, there has to be some kind of an ideological revival of the extremism, especially the twisted one of groups like the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. But I think the first thing that most countries need to do is to move away from this idea that churches will be protected by God. Prayers will not do much help. So I think they have to realize.
Excuse me, jumping in here, David. I mean, it's obviously not churches. We've seen synagogues being attacked. We've seen mosques being attacked. So sadly, no religion is exempt of the horrors that we are seeing. I'm just wondering what it says about the state of play as far as ISIL is concerned and conducting these sort of attacks, what ISIL is expecting in response, because obviously they do this to get a response as well.
I think one of the things which they're expecting in response is that there would be a reprisal attack. ISIS uses this as a form of radicalization, what we call an indirect radicalization, because once they attack Christian churches or other religions, what happens is they expect some kind of a retaliation. And when that happens, against, like we saw in the case of New Zealand, then a lot more Muslims are then radicalized using the rhetoric that Islam is under attack, which of course is very different from when you look at it from a Christian perspective. So what expect is to see some kind of, again, a retaliation from the Christian churches.
And sadly, groups like ISIL are gaining footholds in other countries, DRC too at the moment. They're growing very fast there. Unfortunately, with all of these, whoever is behind it, you've got to deal with the grassroots issues, don't you? I mean, how much commonality do they have?
They have a huge commonality. First of all, you spoke about the spread of the Islamic State tentacles across not just the Middle East, but also in Africa. We saw a recent planting of the Islamic State's, organization in DRC, by the borders of Uganda. The underlying issue is that the defeat, or what I call the displacement of the Islamic State from Iraq and Syria, has actually allowed them, or allowed some of the very well-trained jihadist fighters and their families to sneak into other countries, whereby they will then, kind of re-emerge and plan. And this is what we're saying. So you've got to, first of all, deal with the underlying causation factors, those push and pull factors that allow them to prosper. How do they recruit? Where do they get their resources from?
Okay, David Otto. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you. Still to come, universities have consistently defended the use of private security companies to stop student protests, but now a report has found that private security guards acted illegally during fees must fall protests. We ask, are children safe on campuses from them?